Welcome to Building Bellingham. I'm your host, Leo Cohen. Season 2 is starting off a little different than Season 1. We're not in the studio and our conversations are live streamed onto the Building Bellingham Facebook page before they make their way here. We're a little rougher around the edges, but the core is the same. Honest conversations with local entrepreneurs, talking about challenges, failures, and the effort it takes to build a successful business. Join me as we dive into the story behind one of Bellingham's biggest brands. Brendan.
How you doing?
What's up, man? Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
We're not canceled yet. We're on Season 2, Episode 5. Brendan Pape here with Brist Mfg Manufacturing, located here in Bellingham. I mean, this is about as grassroots as it gets, right?
Oh, yeah. Local. Practically neighbors.
Pretty much neighbors, man. So tell me a little bit about you. What a lot of people see is because you're a supporting business. You support other businesses by, creating merch and signage and all of that, all of the above. People know about you, but it's kind of like secondarily at this point. And you had a pivot point in your business career, right? Tell me a little bit about who you are and where you came from. How did you end up in Bellingham with this manufacturing empire up here?
Yeah, totally. So I was born in Seattle area. I lived there until about the 5th grade. And then my mom and stepdad, we moved out to Minneapolis. So I lived in Minneapolis through high school. And I knew that I wanted to get back out to the West Coast. So I came out here, went to Western Washington University and got my undergrad. And that's kind of where it all started. That's where my past business partner and I, we started a clothing brand called Decidual our junior year of college. And the rest is kind of history. For the last 10 years, I've been owning and managing my own business, and Brist was a big pivot off of that clothing brand.
Yeah. Well, and was this sophomore year or junior year of at Western that you had made this decision to start creating a clothing brand? And you guys were at the bookstore, the Western bookstore. I remember when I was at Western seeing your clothing everywhere in there.
Yeah, that they gave us our big start, man. So the goal behind the clothing company was ultimately we just wanted to be creative and sell shirts to our friends. It was ultimately just supposed to be a hobby. When it comes to making T-shirts, the barrier of entry is pretty low. So we're like, oh, we can do this. So we went and scrounged up some cash and bought a bunch of equipment on Craigslist and set up shop in my bedroom. Definitely lost the girlfriend after that move. So the business kind of took over, and our first kind of big break was getting our clothes in the Western bookstore. And I remember going in there with an invoice that was written on a Word document. And Cheryl from the Western bookstore, she is an absolute saint. She's like, you should intern here. I need to teach you some things. And so that was kind of like the big break point for us. We sold a ton of merchandise that really helped us kind of propel the business forward, reinvest, and ultimately open up new opportunities.
Yeah,
it was,
so
super exciting.
And you're a couple of college kids at this point. You're going through school. So people don't look at school as a full-time job. If you're going to do it right, it's a full-time job, right? Yep. And so where did this idea come from? I mean, was it just you had some extra time, or did you just see shirts and you thought, we could do that? We're creative. We have the same mindset. What do we do?
Yeah. I mean, it was just an idea that came from out of the classroom. We're like, oh, we should start a clothing brand. And we're like, oh yeah, let's do it. And we actually took our step forward and bought the equipment and kind of dove right in. And we found the time, in between school and everything. We made time for it. And that was kind of like our job. Granted, we weren't making any money. It was kind of like a volunteer job. And I remember, graduating college, and that was like when I had to make that big decision. Do I go into the corporate world, or do I figure out how to make this work? And I think that was the biggest challenging. I think one of the most challenging points for Christian and I at the time was making that decision, like, hey, let's try to make this work. And at the time we were making no money, like $0. My mom's like, what are you doing? You have, a ton of student debt. This is not a good idea. You don't even have enough money to support yourself after graduation. So what I did was I walked the docks, the Bellingham docks, to try to find a fishing job. I went down there every morning with donuts. Couldn't tie a knot to save my life. And I was fortunate enough to land a job on a fishing boat for 3 months. I came back with a decent chunk of change, which bought me time. And we clawed and scratched and bootstrapped our way. And we finally got it to the point where, we were able to support ourselves, which was pretty exciting.
One thing that you and I have talked about too is, especially our generation, the millennial generation, there's a lot of creative people, right? And there's a lot of creative people from every generation. But one of the things that I hear from other generations too, complaining about our generation, is that we have this sense of entitlement. But you guys said, well, this is what we want to do. I don't want to go work for somebody else. And I just need to figure out how to get the cash to do this. Tell me about your mindset at that point, saying, okay, well, I don't really know how to get cash besides just going and getting a job working for somebody else or going on a fishing boat. How did you make that commitment? How did you just decide that you were going to commit to, I need to make this amount of money. I'm just going to stay committed. I'm not going to get distracted. I'm just going to do it because this is what we want to do.
Totally. That's no wasn't an option. I think at that point, we were coming out of, no wasn't an option. We wanted to prove, people wrong. I think, starting a clothing company is kind of like the typical, business that a lot of people start. And I think there's a lot of, people that were like, oh, this isn't going to work. And, we were both very tenacious, individuals, and we were committed to making it work. And neither of us were privileged. We didn't have, financial support beforehand, and we didn't, set ourselves up to have, a good chunk of change, because we were dinking around doing this throughout college. But we lived super meagerly. We busted ass, and, we just paid ourselves the bare minimum to be able to survive, the bare minimum. And then everything else was invested back into the company so we could continue to grow. And I think that was the key to our success, is we were so diligent about not taking a cent for the first, few years. And, looking back on it, it was super challenging. That's kind of why, another big reason why I came out with more student loans than I probably should have is I was kind of paying myself in student loans to survive, for about 3 years there.
So you're keeping this ember going. And, one of the things that I haven't learned until, the last 5 or 6 years of my life is like this whole concept of, how do you acquire customers? Obviously it's building a relationship, and that's really the true term. But you guys were ultimately started out with Decidual doing straight to consumer, direct to consumer, right? Mm-hmm. And your customer was not businesses. It was students around campus, or, people online buying your shirts and your hats and whatnot. How did you figure out how to acquire customers? Was it just on campus? Tell me more about that process.
Yeah. So for Decidual, we would go to every single event, any outdoor event. We were there with a booth. We would give out free stickers galore. We didn't have a marketing budget. So we're like, what's the cheapest thing to give out that people will be stoked on? And it was stickers. And then the next thing you know, you had all of like Bellingham, Washington with, a Decidual sticker on their car. And, we had probably only sold 24, 48 shirts at the time. But then people started wondering, like, what the heck is this company that I continue to see around town? And I think that's what really helped elevate and kind of put us on the map, in addition to the Western bookstore. Some of those shirts that we were selling in the Western bookstore were, I think that the Cheryl from the Western bookstore, the buyer there, she compared it to like the Beanie Baby craze. Everyone had one of those neon green Washington ground t-shirts. They were everywhere. And that helped out a ton. We had a ton of good friends too in the outdoor space that were, amateur or professional athletes that helped put us on the map as well. So just networking, and yeah, man,
he's back. It's
I'm
all
back.
Good. So interesting. So you're starting from basically nothing on this. You're acquiring customers because you basically put out brand. You just put your brand out there. Did
Yeah.
you know that that was a strategy, or was that just the first thing that popped into your head that you're like, well, let's just get the brand everywhere and get everyone wondering what it is?
I think we kind of knew that, that we got to put it on the map somehow, and we can't buy all this inventory to put it on the map. So what is the cheapest thing, to do? What is that thing that's going to stick with people? No pun intended. And it was like a sticker. Yep. And we got thousands and thousands and thousands of stickers made, and we just gave them out for free. We were always on up at, Vendors Row. We'd go down to Seattle and go to, snowboard premieres. So we're definitely, super focused on, north of Seattle area at the beginning.
At the beginning. And when you're doing any sort of apparel brand, I mean, I've seen it many, many times where inventory is always the big, it's kind of the pain point, right? How do you buy too much? Do you buy too little? How do you do this? So when you guys were starting out and didn't have as much cash on hand, because the business, you're putting everything back into the business, making sure that fire keeps going. How did you guys gauge how much inventory to buy? I mean, what were you doing to track your metrics to be able to really ensure that you have the right amount of inventory on hand?
This question kind of leads to how we, began setting the foundation for Brist. But originally, we would try to kind of like make to order. But when it came to like super custom stuff, like stuff that is like super unique, it's not just, a product that you can go get embroidered down the street or a t-shirt that you can print on. That was the stuff that was challenging to gauge, because going overseas and creating something custom, that's when you open up yourself to being stuck with a ton of inventory. And that's how we kind of began setting the foundation for Brist. Is we were at this point in Decidual where we were tired of just making simple screen printed t-shirts. We were tired of making, just simple embroidered hats. We wanted to do more custom products, that you would find in an REI or a Nordstrom or your favorite, snowboard shop that was super, super unique apparel. And the only way to really do that at the time was to be, a super large corporation that had awesome supply chains, because suppliers overseas, they make their money on volume. Large orders, like 1,000 pieces of a style and a color, 5,000 pieces of a style and a color. And we're this, super small, company that, has a hard time selling, 72 shirts of a single style. That's kind of where we had a hard time. And that's how we set the foundation for Brist. Is we wanted to challenge that way of thinking in the manufacturing space. And to do that, to try to take a step in creating more custom apparel for Decidual at the time, we flew to China kind of off the cuff and met with probably a dozen or so random suppliers. And we had these huge presentations that we brought to them on like the importance of, low minimums and quick turn times, and how, if they would service these smaller businesses, small businesses and mid-sized businesses make up a huge chunk, of the population, that they would get that volume back. And ultimately, they kind of a lot of them looked at us and laughed and were like, you need to get the heck out of here. You totally just stole my time. And a few of them gave us, a shot. And those are the ones, a lot of those ones we still work with today. But, beginning custom products, we had a hard time gauging the inventory. I remember we, bought like our first custom product. I think we had to get 500 of. It was like a custom fleece jacket, and we had it for like in inventory for 3 years. We're like, dang, yeah. It was a hard sell.
And that's just for people that don't know a whole lot about inventory. That is your cash sitting on the shelf and not going where it needs to be. And that's, that's stressful. So what I'm hearing, the cool part about this pivot, this transition point in your world, was that it was, and it's, this is part of your, mission statement, how Brist was created, was it was created out of necessity. You guys hit this pain point and you're like, okay, we can't be the only ones that are going through this pain point, because like you said, there's so much of the market that's made up of like small to mid-sized businesses. And so is that how Brist was created? It was out of necessity for this target market that wasn't being serviced, in your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. We originally solved the problem for ourselves, and then we realized that this solution could be applied to many other businesses. And to support Decidual, at the beginning, the clothing brand, we started making things for other businesses and organizations, so we could inject Decidual with cash and continue to expand and buy new products. And then it got to the point where we were making so much more stuff for other people, other businesses and brands, that we were like, we need to put Decidual on the back burner and take a full pivot and focus on how we can continue to provide, businesses and organizations with all the necessary tools to create custom branded merchandise. And that is, that happened in 2015, and we haven't looked back since.
And are these people that, are now your customers? Are these people that you were competing with at the time? I mean, some were probably breweries and other, kind of similar industries, but there was probably other clothing brands that you guys were competing with, and you're like, you know what? They probably have the same. We have these conversations all the time. This is it. These are going to be our first customer. Who were your first customers when you made that pivot?
When we made that, the Seattle Mariners came pretty early. Aslan Brewery, out of Bellingham, they were one from the beginning. Western, we've worked with Young Life, all sorts of outdoor companies. Teton Gravity was a pretty early one as well. Mount Baker. So, they were kind of all with us from the beginning and helping us kind of figure out, the program and how it worked. And it was pretty exciting to see. And the organizations that we work with today, I wouldn't have ever imagined making, apparel for some of these organizations if you would have asked me 5 years ago. And 99.9% of people don't know that we made that apparel because it's 100% supposed to be private labeled for them.
Yep. So these are, you just mentioned some huge local businesses and some huge regional and national businesses. And there's Sundance out there too. There's the Mariners. Aslan's a huge local brand. Mount Baker obviously is big. How did these meetings transpire? Did you already have these connections through other avenues, or did you just go in there and say, all right, I'm here, this is what we're looking to do, and they followed the vision, or did they say no? What happened?
Some are good friends, like Aslan. Those guys have been friends from the beginning, so they gave us, a chance, and I think they understood the vision and what we were going for, which was awesome. And then others, for the longest time, me and a colleague, we would just drive, all throughout the West Coast and go into businesses and pitch the business. We'd sleep on friends' couches, and a lot of people loved the vision. They're like, what do you mean you can make me a custom product from scratch with my brand on it? So I don't just have to have that typical embroidered hat. Like, I can create my own unique identity. And we're like, yeah, we can do that. And that's kind of how it all began. And it was super. It's still super, super fun, but it's interesting in like the early days. You're walking into meetings with some big customers, and you're kind of faking it till you make it a little bit. That's kind of where that duct tape and the zip ties come in. Fortunately, you got to kind of paint over it, and so no one can see, but you're like, oh man, are we going to be able to do this? And throughout the process, I think we were confident in being able to figure it out if we didn't know how to do it at the time.
Yep. Yeah, that fake it till you make it term is so interesting, because what it really means, some people fake it till they make it, but what just knowing you and how this business has grown at such a high quality, it's more like betting on yourself, right? You're like, at the start, you have to bet more on yourself as a person. And then at some point you get systems and processes in place to make it a little bit more leveraged and automated. Tell me a little bit about betting on yourself. Have you always been someone that's bet on yourself, or is that something that you've developed over time?
I don't think I've always been that person. I think when it comes to business, yes. Especially, if I'm going to say something to a customer, it's like, I'm not going to walk out of that room and not deliver. I think it's not just the organization's name that's, attached to whatever that commitment is, but it's mine. And, I think highly of, my integrity as well as the organization's, but I think, we believed in, in our mission and our goal, and we were willing to, bet on ourselves at all costs. And we didn't take no for an answer. And, if we said we could do something, we figured it out and would follow through. And that doesn't mean it wasn't hard. I mean, there's so many instances that were super challenging. I remember in 2019, I spent 3.5 weeks in China because we had this massive deal with a huge corporate organization out of Seattle. And it wasn't anything that we had done before. Not that we weren't confident in doing it, we just hadn't done it before. So we wanted to take, the proper precautions to make sure that it was done correctly. And, I was in China, making sure that, we were facilitating everything and it was going to go as planned. But at the time we hadn't done a project of that caliber, but we were confident that we could execute it. And I think that's what's so awesome about, our team is they're extremely resourceful, and they show a lot of grit, and they're very solution oriented. And usually we have those conversations before we commit, saying, "Hey, can we do this, or is this a long shot?" But we have been able to accomplish and do things that I never ever would have even thought about, even just a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. It keeps evolving, and
Totally.
so there's this pivot point where you guys created Brist out of necessity because it just was naturally magnetizing in that direction, right? And I think a lot of the times what we hear is that, oh, it was all good. We went for it. There was no, fear around it. But one of the things that I like to talk about is fear, and it's still a major pivot. I mean, it might be a very on par, like similar industry, but it's very different, right? You're changing your business. Tell me about the fear around a pivot, and how big was your team? Did you guys, did you have to get everyone on board, or was it just you and a couple people that
I think at the time it was right. Yeah, I think at the time it was like 8 of us. So the majority of us were on board. What made that pivot easier is the financials. It was a financially sound decision. The economics, completely penciled out. At that time, we were making, so much more product for other people that we were just diluting our focus and diluting, I think, our opportunity for success, because we were focusing on Decidual, which was the brand at the time that wasn't showing a ton of success. And we were, so focused on that we, I think we probably should have made that pivot a little bit earlier, because it's, we were crushing it on the custom manufacturing, standpoint, but the brand, it was kind of flat for the majority of its, of its life. But that was kind of the ultimate goal and the dream that we really held on to. And then, one day it's like, hey, it's time to confront the, the brutal facts. And, if we take this off our plate and we focus here, I think we can create like a bomber, business that is going to be, built to last.
Yep. And so you said there's about 8 people. So tell me a little bit about the roles at that time. So it was you, and then who else was on your team? What were the roles at that time?
Yeah, so it was me. I had a business partner at the time. We had Carson, who's been our first designer. He's still with us today. He is an absolute rock star, incredible designer. So he was there. We had, I think, a couple team members that were a part of kind of like the production aspect. We had an intern at the time. Her name was Olivia. She's with us today. She runs our e-commerce program. And we had, I think like one sales rep, Aaron, who might come back and join us. He took a hiatus to Seattle and might be joining us again, which is exciting. So it was a pretty small team. So production, design, and sales is pretty much kind of what it was made up of.
Do you think at that time you were over-structured or under-structured for what ensued after that? Because I mean, Jack over at Aslan, they're, friends, and you know them, and there's connections maybe to Mount Baker through snowboarding, but were you prepared for like these bigger conversations, or was it just something where you're like, all right, we're going to just take it one step at a time. If we need to grow, we'll grow. Tell me a little bit more about that. Okay, we've started this, the next step after that.
Yeah, we definitely were. We were underprepared. We weren't structured. I think shortly after, we did make that pivot. We got a pretty big PO, and a good friend from college lent us $50,000 to cover that PO. And Yeah. And then after that, we really started focusing on building the foundation and what it would take to be able to support, the business that we were trying to create. And when you look at Brist today, we almost have like 4 individual businesses, and we have evolved a lot. But at the time, it was we were trying to do a lot. We were trying to do a lot with a super small team.
Yep. No, I can resonate with that.
Yeah.
And then only from there you can become more and more prepared and just
Totally.
understanding how that goes. But yeah, so one of the things you mentioned was you were challenging the norm of manufacturing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Apparel manufacturing. And typically like the companies that you had gone and pitched about supplying decidual were like, you need a minimum of 1,000. What was your vision for challenging those norms? Because you're very clearly unique in what you do, which is why companies work with you.
In challenging that, because we couldn't be successful without doing that. So in order to make decidual successful, we needed, supplier relations that would focus on low minimums. We needed to have, the tool belt to create custom apparel, to distribute custom apparel, to design custom apparel. When it comes to creating, just screen printed t-shirts, sure, that is, the barrier of entry is, much lower, but when it comes to creating a full suite and providing an organization all the necessary tools to create custom merchandise, you need a hefty infrastructure and you need a supply chain that can support it. And in order to support the customer segment that we were targeting, we needed suppliers that understood the importance of low minimums and quick turn times.
Right. So you weren't, it didn't just fall into place. You had to make all of these relationships on the back end, show those people the vision, and then be able to go and say and tell and communicate, transfer energy to people and say, this is what we're doing. And we have this backing now. So there's so much building ahead of time, it sounds like, to be able to go talk to your first customer.
Totally. Yeah. And that was kind of like how we built this digital, I guess, out of the beginning. When I mentioned going to China, that's where we really presented the vision and the idea for Decidual that ultimately kind of bled into, what Brist is today and that foundation. So it was getting, the back end, all those suppliers on board. And then after that, it was communicating to our customers what the heck we were doing. And a lot of them, for the longest time and still today, can't quite wrap their head around what is it that you actually do? Because we do quite a bit of stuff. So,
and how do you communicate that? Because it's when you have something that's different, when you have something that's proven, not that this isn't proven, but when you have something that has been done on many different levels, to like, let's say the mass producing scale, that's easy to communicate. Hey, this is proven, this works. And you're creating this new market, right? How do you go and talk to the buyer at the Mariners or Jack over at Aslan or Mount Baker or any of the Sundance, any of these big organizations, and say, how do you communicate that to them and help them understand that if they're truly asking, how does this work? How do you do this?
We had to show them. So we had to bring samples, we had to show them, we had to present. I mean, to this day, the reason why we've got a lot of our biggest customers is because we put these comprehensive proposals in front of them that really want to explain what we do. And it shows basically we put together pitch decks it's an art portfolio that shows an entire organization's line and what we could do for them if they were to work with Brist. And I think them being able to see that and see, how their brand can be portrayed on custom apparel, speaks volumes. And that is ultimately, I think, what really helped us communicate what we were doing to our customers and then showing them what we had done in the past with other customers.
And even like the first couple, you're just like, look, you're betting on me and our team.
Yeah.
Right. And then it became, okay, we have 1 in our portfolio. Okay, we have 10 in our portfolio. And all of a sudden it's like, it becomes easier, right?
Exactly. And we just took, we continued to take the successes and show them to, different customers. And that was like the testament that, hey, this does work. We have proof, here's testimonies, here's products, here's case studies, which really helped, us validate what we were doing, and then also prove to the customers and give them the confidence that what we were doing was going to work and that we were going to help them create, a successful apparel program that was either going to elevate their brands, open up a new additional channel of revenue, help them, better market and target, different customers and so forth.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I didn't realize how much of, just at breweries as an example, how much merch actually, is part of their revenue. Like I just didn't realize that. And how did you, was that something that has changed over the last 10 years, or is that something that's always been a huge proponent or component of, a brewery or a restaurant?
I think craft breweries for sure. I mean, that was one of, the first customer segments that we really worked within was the craft breweries. And it's crazy, the amount of loyalty that communities show, and you want to, and I think that's like the power of apparel. We all wear what we are proud of. We wear what we like, so if I go into a brewery and I like this brewery and it's, in my hometown and I'm excited about their logo and I'm excited about what they're doing, I want to wear, a shirt because that's something that aligns with, my values, my interests, what I like. And it's nuts how much, how much merchandise beverage companies can sell. I mean, I feel like you can't walk into a grocery store without seeing some sort of, brewery hat or t-shirt on somebody. And I think the same goes for, many other industries. I think allowing yourself to create something custom is you're able to give your brand a voice, and where beer can't go, a t-shirt can, and I think it's critical for them to grow their brand. Is I think the power of branding is the more you see something, the more you can gain trust in whatever that thing is. It's similar to kind of how we tried to market to Sigil. It was stickers, and the more people saw those stickers, the more they were interested in what it was. And each one of those stickers created an interaction, which created a memory with whomever that person was. And the same goes with apparel. And what's cool about apparel is you're a walking billboard. You're influencing people every time you wear something. It's a reflection of you, and it's a reflection, of the brand, and it gets the brand on the map. I think apparel is super critical.
Yep. Let's talk about brand, because one of the interesting things is you went from a brand, you're still a brand, but you went from a forefront brand, to the customer,
Mm-hmm.
B2C, to helping and basically consulting these businesses on customizing their brand, and brand's super important. Tell me a little bit more about your vision on brand and how you consult people as they come to you as potential customers.
Totally. I think the story that resonates with me about brand, and it was kind of an epiphany that I had when we were creating Brist and pivoting from Decidual to Brist. But I was at an outdoor trade show, and at this trade show, you have all the biggest brands that everyone aspires to work for. Everybody really looks up to, from North Face to Patagonia to GoPro to Hydro Flask. And you're walking around this trade show, and you'll see garbage cans completely filled up with merchandise, branded merchandise from these organizations. And I remember seeing that, and I remember thinking, I was like, this is discrediting these brands. And these brands are putting their name on these products, and these products are simply not a reflection of these brands, whether or not it's poor design or poor quality. And I think that's, one of the biggest things that we try to, tell our customers. The last thing that we want to do is create something that's going to get thrown away. The last thing that you want to do as a brand owner is give something to someone that they're not going to appreciate or value. And, that's been, one of our big missions from day one, is to help organizations elevate their brand through the power of apparel. And in order to do that, you got to be thinking about quality. You got to be thinking about your consumer and what they like. And if your goal is to, get just quantity out there of a cheap product, you need to understand you're just burning your marketing dollars. And if that, cheap, if I feel like, anything needs, in terms of branding, I think, whatever you're going to put your logo on, it needs to align with your primary objective and your primary product. So, for North Face, if you're going to put your logo on a t-shirt, that t-shirt needs to be quality because you're selling a quality product. There needs to be alignment. So if you sell a quality beer, you should be selling quality products that align with that beer. you
Yeah.
know, because people believe that your brand is, you know, a quality brand. And it was pretty disgusting just to see how much stuff was thrown away. And we're completely against tchotchke stuff, stuff that gets, you know, cheap promotional items. We have done, you know, we have actually began to introduce some of those products into, you know, our product lineup, but we do it in a way that is as mindful as possible and really try to understand, you know, the customer's mission with the objective behind buying that merchandise. And, you know, we try to position, you know, promotional products that are quality and going to serve a purpose and be used and not just end up in a junk drawer that gets, you know, thrown away in a month or so.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
there's a lot of businesses that create, you know, whether it's, you know, cutting boards or just like random things. I mean, maybe that's not the best example because you use cutting boards, but
yeah.
it's those tchotchkes that your mission is to get your brand out there, but they end up just getting thrown away. And so let's talk about, there's this, you create this niche market, right? For small, middle size, and obviously there's bigger brands they're now working with you as well. But you make your money because it's probably a lower profit margin. You know, when you have to produce, you have to mass produce to make a lot of money, I think, in the manufacturing world. What did you adjust to make the numbers work when you're in this niche market?
That is a great question, and that's something that, you know, we're continuing to evolve today. So seeing how originally our model was to serve small businesses, we weren't making, you know, super large volume. So we had to work really hard at negotiating, you know, our costs with the factory and help them understand, hey, you know, we may order this hat right here in 72 pieces, but we're going to order, you know, on the year 80,000, you know, of this style from you, to try to, you know, get, you know, better quantity discounts. But that is something that, you know, we're working on right now, is understanding our customer segments, what products are most profitable, and, you know, expanding those product categories. But all in all, I think from a manufacturing standpoint, we've had a pretty healthy margin. One thing that, you know, we did get a pretty big margin hit a couple of years ago with the tariff increases. We saw a pretty big hit to, you know, our bottom line because of that. But we've worked hard on, you know, trying to find efficiencies to make, you know, cut down our costs. And we've worked really hard at negotiating, you know, our raw costs with our suppliers. And we do a lot of things in-house. So we do commercial grade screen printing in-house, which, you know, allows us to control our costs and to try to create, you know, efficiencies so we can, you know, maximize our output. And that's helped as well.
Yep. And you're at this point, let's go back to that, the famous 8, the legendary 8, when you pivoted and you have this smaller team, and you're talking about scaling, and you're talking about, you know, screen printing machines. You probably already had a pretty sizable inventory of machines that you needed. But if you're going to scale, not only did you need more help as far as leverage goes, more people, but also I don't know how much screen printing machines cost. I'm sure they're not cheap, but tell me about these moments where you're taking this leap of faith and saying, okay, we're going to buy this $50,000 fill in the blank. What was that scaling process like between people and machine?
It was, that came down to understanding our output, you know, what we needed to be able to do on a regular basis to keep up with the demands. And we started super small. Like, we had a manual press out the gate. And then I remember we bought our first automatic press. I think it was such an old, dirty machine. It was, I think, $25,000. We were so excited, super worried though. We were like, gosh, man, this better increase our output. This better work. The guy that came to set it up lived in his van. He had like a cat with him. It was so bizarre. But that was our first press. And that really showed us the power of efficiencies, and that, you know, equipment can really help create, you know, strong efficiencies and really increase our output. And then after that, we bought, you know, a new press, and now we have a handful of new presses. We bought some sizable equipment this last year, automatic like poly bagger, and now those decisions, you know, they're a lot more easy to digest, because you can, you know, run the numbers and understand, you know, it's going to get paid off in this amount of time. You know, this is how much more efficient it is. now than it was before. But at the time, being young and not fully understanding, everything, it was always, a super long discussion. And I think what also made things, a lot easier was we didn't take out any loans. We took out a super small equipment loan, but we heavily reinvested back into the business. And I think we were both kind of scared of debt at the time. We wanted to be in control of our destiny. We didn't want to borrow any money. Now, I understand obviously the importance, of that. And but back then, we pretty much paid for everything with cash.
And how does, you're in a situation where you have the ability to analyze your reserves, and you have the ability to look at debt, and you now understand debt better, and good debt,
Mm-hmm.
bad debt, the right debt for now.
Mm-hmm.
How did you gauge that before, and how do you look at it now, and what are some things that you might finance versus pay cash for now, knowing that a lot more of your systems and processes are proven?
I think you need cash to grow. And I think that's the biggest thing. You gotta have cash to grow. And I think because of that, financing equipment is obviously the necessary way to go, as if you want to have, a solid, a more rapid growth trajectory, at least for us. So I think that's kind of like one of the biggest things. We'll finance things now, opposed to paying for cash, because we want to keep as much liquid as possible so we can put it into hiring experienced employees and other growth opportunities and stuff like that. Cash is king.
Yep.
It's an important thing to any growing business.
So you're human, right? I'm pretty sure you're human.
Definitely not an econ.
Yeah. Tell me about failure, because that's a huge thing that I think a lot of people project that they don't have. It's a very vulnerable thing to talk about. And some people see them as the end of the road, and it's ruins their world. And other people look at that as a red light that turns to a green light, right? Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit more about some of your favorite failures throughout your journey.
First off, failure is the essence of learning, right? Without failing, I feel like you can't learn. We've had so many, shortcomings, from, trusting suppliers that weren't necessarily trustworthy. And next thing you know, we have, thousands of dollars in products that are unsellable, to, we had our fair share of problems from like a supplier front, and then sometimes biting off too much, that we can handle, and, not fulfilling, an opportunity in like a timely fashion. I think leadership wise, I think I'm continuing to learn, and I think there's decisions that I've made, in the past that weren't, the best decisions, or I could have handled situations in, a better way. And I wouldn't necessarily consider, all of these things failures. I think they're shortcomings that help you learn on how you can do something better in the future. We've had tons of challenges. I went through, business partner buyout. That wasn't a failure. That was just, a challenge and a big bump in the road. To, Decidual was in a pretty big legal lawsuit over the brand name. And, we've definitely fallen flat on our face, countless times. But I think all those times have made us stronger and helped us recognize, what we need to do differently. And if you don't fail, you're not a human, right? You got to do it to succeed. You have to. It's so critical. And I think it's important to look. It's so important for learning as well, and experimenting. I would rather have our team fall flat on their face and not necessarily try. If you truly believe in something, let's go for it. Let's figure it out. We've tried to do things, and they didn't necessarily work. Like in 2020, we pivoted our business model. Not our business model. We took a brief pivot because we had no business. Q1 2020, everything stopped. We had 50 full-time employees, and we had customers that didn't want to buy. There was so much uncertainty. So we tried to figure out, what do we do? So we launched a campaign called We Got This America. And the goal with this campaign was the goal of this campaign was to try to be a breath of fresh air in so much negativity, and ultimately give small businesses a platform to help kind of fund themselves with these, slogan t-shirts that, said, "We got this America." We built a website, we launched a video, we made product in a matter of a week. It was incredible how quickly the team rallied around this. And looking back on it, I don't think it was a failure, but it didn't meet the expectations that I think I originally anticipated. But I think what we had accomplished there was immense success. I think if, some team members may look at it, they're like, "Oh, this wasn't a huge profitable opportunity. It didn't make us a ton of, it didn't keep the lights on," which is what we were hoping it was to do. But the learnings that we took away from that, I think are priceless. It was such an incredible learning opportunity.
And you just mentioned many different instances where you have this time after you make a mistake. You have to make a judgment call, and you have to make it based on your experience. And if you have none, you have to you're kind of winging it to a certain extent. Tell me about those moments, and maybe it's the time has kind of shortened up a little bit from, you have thinking and doing. So you have this time to process what happened and learn from it. Do you think you've gotten quicker at processing a mistake and then acting, or having your team doing the same thing? Do you feel like that's gotten quicker, or is it the same speed that you had when you first started doing this, just different problems?
I think it's a lot quicker. I think we're good about understanding. I think we take a lean approach. We try to, if we implement an idea, we get, or a product launch or something like that, we try to get feedback and continuously improve that product or that aspect that, evolves it for the better, which helps us make decisions on whether or not we want to continue to move forward with something that may or may not be successful. Whereas I think before we would be like, "Oh yeah, we can do this. Let's keep going. Rather than, recognizing, hey, this, may not be the best option. For We Got This America, I think, after probably 2 months or a month and a half, we recognized, hey, we need to pull back on continuing to put a ton of resources into this. It was an all team thing, but we recognized, hey, this isn't getting the traction that we, originally anticipated. And we need to begin thinking about, a new direction, or assuming, the similar direction that we were going prior to, everything halting.
And this is, we don't have to talk too much about the pandemic, but this hit at 10 years into you being a business owner, right? This is right around your 10-year anniversary of owning your own business. Obviously, Brist has been around since 2015, but this hits you at 10 years. Is this like oh my God, you just never know what's going to happen? What was your mindset like at that point, saying, huge accomplishment, we made it 10 years. Mm-hmm. What do we do next?
We came into 2020 with huge growth goals. We were, building the foundation to continue to grow. I was wanting to get to a place where I could not step back, but step into the CEO role rather than be immersed in all these different facets, which I feel like I had always kind of been, sucked in to all these various things. So I was ultimately super excited for, 2020. We were going to grow. I was going to step back. I was going to delegate. And then literally got punched in the face by COVID. And it was overwhelming. It was like all the plans went out the window. There isn't anything online that you can read about to kind of prepare for this. It was extremely challenging. I think 2020 was the hardest year for me mentally and emotionally. Just the ups and downs, not just with the business, but I think the ups and downs that it put our team through, and the fact that as a leader, you're trying to shelter your team and do what's best for your team, but to be honest, I had no idea what to do. And what I tried to do was best. And looking back on it, I stand by everything that, that we did and the decisions that I made. But all those decisions were extremely hard, and it was extremely, it was a challenging year. We came out super strong. We had a record quarter in Q4, but Q1 and Q2, man, we went from 50 employees down to 14. And I think that was the hardest day I've ever had in my life, because it's like, and a lot of those, a handful of those people had been with us from the very beginning, and I didn't know, it's like, are we going to be able to continue to maintain, you only have so much cash. How long is that going to last? We have pretty extensive overhead costs. We do warehousing and fulfillment. So we have to maintain that component, and just to maintain that is an extremely costly thing. We just moved into a new office building. And, that was a hefty expense that, so it was tricky. It was a tricky year, but I think what was cool is it was really inspiring to see how organizations pivoted. It was inspiring to see how organizations adapted. It was, uplifting to see how we adapted, how we moved fast. And I think we accomplished more than we've ever accomplished in 2020. So as hard of a year as it was, I'm extremely thankful for it.
Back against the wall. I mean, you make some of your biggest decisions with your back against the wall. And let's dissect the brain of a CEO for a minute here. And we've had a chance to connect outside of the podcast a little bit, and you're incredibly down to earth, and it's always great to connect with other people who are just grounded and just humans, right? And you've probably had people, bad hires at some point, or people that end up taking other opportunities. And so you have this great culture. What is it like inside the mind of a CEO to say, we need to cut X percentage of our employees, and having this this moral debate of something that is the necessity of the company to make sure that it continues forward, but is an incredibly hard decision? Tell me about your mindset in those moments where you have to make a really hard decision. What was that like for you?
I mean, in terms of 2020, is that?
Yep.
Definitely super emotional. I think, at the end of the day, we have to do whatever we can do to preserve the organization. And even though that's what, I know is the best thing, and the things that, we have to do, I remember we would drag we drug the feet. It's like, we need to be making these cuts. We needed to make these cuts a week ago, but it was such a challenging thing to do. I think 2020 left me calloused, from that. I think I've learned a lot, and I was fortunate enough to have we had hired an HR person who is now our COO, and she has a ton of experience, and she brought an incredible perspective and helped out so much with that. I don't know what I would have done without her in 2020. So thankful for that. But those conversations are super hard, because as a business owner, you want to be able to provide for your team members, and when you're put up against a wall and you can't do anything, it's challenging. I mean, I listen to those, the podcasts from like Dan Price and stuff. He's like, I would never lay off any of my employees. And he has a unique perspective, but he also has a unique business. He has a tech company. He doesn't necessarily, need to. It's his cash. I mean, I think you have to gauge the business. I think I listened to one of his things, and he said that I think leaders that have to lay off their employees are bad leaders. And I was like, I don't agree with that at all. I think if an owner is trying to lay off employees so they can get, a better bonus or something like that, absolutely, that's not a good owner. They made a bad decision, to hire that person. They need to stick with it and figure it out. But if the business isn't in jeopardy, I think you have to make those decisions.
Yep. And part of that is this whole concept of radical candor, right? I don't know if you've read that book, but it's this concept that when you genuinely care about somebody, you're willing to have the tough conversation. And you've probably had moments where you're like, I'm not even willing to have this conversation, because we have to genuinely care, right? Mm-hmm. And So in those moments where you have all this emotion going, you care a lot about this person, you want the best for them, you don't want to put anybody out. How important is that radical honesty or candor with that person, to have that conversation?
I think it's super important to, to help them understand what's going on and why you're doing what you're doing. And I think that's where you have to have that human element,
Yep.
And I think our team really understood why we had to do the things that we did. And we had an incredible team that, was willing to work when when we couldn't afford to pay them to work. But I think, communicating it and helping team members understand why you're doing what you're doing is critical.
Yep. And part of that's culture. And I know culture has got to be one of the biggest corporate buzzwords of all time, but there is a really genuine, if you talk about it in the right way, it is a truly genuine and really meaningful thing. And I know that's been super huge for you guys because you have a lot of the same people that you started with. And tell me about your culture. Ding, 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 corporate buzzword. But tell me about what your culture means to you. What is it? What is your culture? What does that mean?
I think we have a very fun and positive and caring culture. Looking back at the beginning, I think it used to be super fun, like zero rules, like bring 18 dogs to the to the warehouse, to the office, make sure, of those 18 dogs, 10 of them are 2-week-old puppies. It was everything went. And it was fun. And, but I think as we've grown and evolved as an organization, so has our culture is growing up. But I believe Brist is an extremely fun and caring place. And it's we definitely grown, and our culture is like we are in the midst of culture change. But I believe it's changing. It is changing for the better. We are growing up. We want to continue to grow. We have, big objectives. That doesn't mean we don't want to have fun. That just means, hey, we can't light fireworks inside on someone's birthday anymore. That's a recipe for disaster.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yes, we would do those things, and we had so much fun. And we're growing out of that kind of stuff, but we still have a blast. We had an incredible virtual Christmas party. We have some party planners that always make sure it's a good time. People feel cared about and people feel appreciated. And we want it also to be a place where people can kind of let their guards down and show their true self.
Yep. Be comfortable bringing themselves to the office or to the factory. Happiness and money. This is like, you and I had somewhat of this conversation last time we talked, and you've got this scale of, yes, money is important for security. Money is important to give opportunities. And I think it sometimes gets a bad rap, and everything can't always be about happiness, but it can't always be about money. Well, tell me, what is your philosophy on the balance of happiness and money as a CEO, and what you try to present to your team on your mindset on that?
Oh man, that's tricky. I think money doesn't create happiness. Looking back at where we came from, I think we're at an awesome place right now. I'm making more money than I made 5 years ago, but I wouldn't say I'm necessarily more happy than I was 5 years ago. I think happiness for me stems from caring about what you do, caring about why you're doing it, caring about who you're doing it with. And I think that creates something that is worth more than any sort of amount of money. And I think early on, I wanted to chase. I still want Brist to grow. I want Brist to grow. I want us to have impact. We always have big, revenue goals, but that revenue goal, that revenue driver, it's not about the money, and it's not about, the net income that we're going to have at the end of the year. But to me, it's more so about the the experience and the value that we're providing our customers and the amount of products that we're getting out there. But I think, yeah, I don't know. I think if you can just be comfortable, I think you can be happy. And I think Dan Price, his philosophy on, trying to pay people a fair wage so they can be comfortable. I think that is an incredible starting point,
Yep.
So I think there's a balance there. I don't think you can't make anything, but you gotta be, comfortable.
Yep. Well, another balancing scale is hard work and luck, right? And some people don't believe in luck. Some people don't have to work hard, and everything falls into their lap. But for you and your story, how much is, just grinding it out, and how much is maybe did you put yourself by working hard in the right opportunities where things happened and they seemed lucky, but they were just happening because of the hard work? What's your philosophy on that balance?
I think in order to be successful, it takes a whole lot of grit and tenacity and not giving up. Sure, there's those anomalies out there that, may not work super hard, but are super successful. But I think, 99% of the business owners out there, entrepreneurs, are working their asses off. And I think because they're working their asses off, opportunities present themselves. And I think some people may think those opportunities are luck, but I think it's because of the hard work that they're putting in is, why. And I think there's, you could call those opportunities luck, but I think those opportunities come from, the hard work. I think looking at, all the things that we've been presented with, it's because we busted our ass for those things. That's why those opportunities presented themselves. We had a huge customer come visit 2 years ago. We have, our production facility is like not great. The walls were, the classic 1970s beige. And we're like, we need to figure this out. We have this huge customer coming on Tuesday. We need to turn this place around. We drove to IKEA. We went to Home Depot. Team members painted the walls over the weekend. We turned this hideous place into a cool place. And we got the deal. And it's because we worked, the team worked their asses off to create a presentable environment that, was well put together. And that's what created that opportunity. And you could say, oh, we got that, that deal, that's luck. But I think it's because of the hard work that we put in.
Yeah. So while you're putting in all that hard work, granted, at the start of the business, it's probably pretty lopsided between personal and business, right? You're pouring so much, your energy, your money, your time into the business, but everybody's got a constant. Everybody's got something that when they do that, whether it's, exercise or snowboarding or meditating or just being around people, or maybe they're introverted and don't want to be around people, and that's their recharge. For you, through everything, through the growth of the business, through the pandemic, through everything, what has been your constant and your reset button so you can come back to the office energized and ready to help your team succeed?
Staying active. And whether that's, working out, snowboarding, surfing, but that's something that I've had to kind of work on. I think for the longest time I would work. I always felt guilty if I wasn't working. I always felt like I needed to work, and I never gave myself, for the longest time, I wouldn't give myself the time to be able to recharge and the time to do those things that I needed. And it was probably about a year ago when I was like, this is so damn unhealthy. Things really need to change. And I finally have, a solid routine that puts me in a good place to start the day. And, I can tell when I don't do it. And if I haven't done something active for the day, it shows. So I think it's super critical to find that balance. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges that I've had throughout my entrepreneur career, is finding that balance. I've always felt like I need to go. I always feel like I need to work. There always needs to be something to be done. At the end of the day, there's always going to be stuff to be done, but you have to be able to step back and realize, there's other things that are more important. And that's, your sanity and, mental well-being.
Yep. And so what advice would you, so someone they want to start a business, a manufacturing business, a coffee shop, whatever industry it's in, what would be one nugget you could pass along to that person or those people from your successes and failures that if you could go back and talk to yourself, 10 years ago, what would you say?
I'd say build a habit, build a routine and try to build a routine early on. I have some friends that are starting businesses right now, and one of them recently, reached out to me and he's like, I'm struggling. All I do is work. And that's how he began. And I think it's hard to break that habit. And I think one of the things that I would recommend, at the beginning is try to set that balance, set a standard for what you expect that balance should be and try to maintain it. And I think if you can do that early on, you're going to have probably a lot more happiness because you're not going to have to constantly combat, the other side.
Yeah, it creates balance, because when you are building your business, there is no balance. You need to create structure, and it's an absolute must. And for those of you that are listening today, if you've got a small or medium or large business and you're not obsessed with branding, you need to talk to this guy. You need to talk to Brist, because I've seen so many brands locally just blossom through really diving into creating a unique branding palette, right? So Instagram and Facebook, Brist Mfg, right? And they can, what's the best way for people, businesses to contact you about working on their brand and getting apparel?
Through our website. So bristmfg.com. We're an end-to-end merchandise management solution. So we can cover, creative design, obviously merchandise manufacturing, warehousing, and fulfillment. And we also do web management. So the goal there is to allow some customers that want it to have a completely hands-off experience. We handle, the full suite of merchandise.
Yep. And you can call Brendan at 10 o'clock at night. He loves getting phone calls at 10 o'clock at night. No,
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Text me.
But yes, go follow those Instagram pages, Brist Mfg, and Facebook page. Go through the website if anyone that's watching would like to find out more information. Brendan, thank you so much for your time today and just sharing your vulnerable story and telling us about who you are.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, brother. Take care.
Thanks, Leo.
Building Bellingham is a community podcast exploring leadership, challenges, failures, and business with entrepreneurs right here in Bellingham, Washington. You can watch interviews live and be the first to hear about upcoming guests on the Building Bellingham Facebook and Instagram pages. Again, I'm your host, Leo Cohen of the Cohen Group Northwest. This episode was produced and edited by Cooper Hansley and Tiffany Holden. Our logo was designed by Sam Vogt. To learn more about the team behind the podcast, search Cohen Group NW on Google, Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn.